Ciao a tutti, Marco here, Winexclub sommelier, and today I have the pleasure to be here with Páger Mátyás from Páger Winery, wonderful winery from the Mátra region. So we're gonna have a couple of these amazing wines and we're gonna have our usual conversation. So let's start with the first questions. What inspired you to become a winemaker? There was a specific moment in your life that made you say, okay, this is my path, this is my destiny.
Nem is tudom, hány éves lehettem. Szerintem 10 éves, 16-7 éves, amikor...
I'm not even sure how old I was. I think I was a teenager, maybe 16. That's when I first ended up in the Mátra region, through my father. In his second marriage, his wife was from Gyöngyöspáta, so that's how I got introduced to this wine region. I took part in a harvest there, and the atmosphere of the harvest. Honestly, it wasn't even winemaking that grabbed me first, it was working with the vines. And after that, naturally, I started falling deeper and deeper into wine culture and the love of wine. But if I had to name one defining moment, I would always go back to that first harvest. And I remember the person I was paired with, he was amazing. He even picked up every single grape that fell on the ground because he'd worked so hard for it. He kept saying, every grape matters, everything has to be harvested. The humbleness and enthusiasm he had for the vineyard, that really stayed with me.
Fantastic. It's basically you started where the wine starts, there in the vineyard, and from them, that started the love.
Így van.
Okay, so we also start because it's like we are here with you and starting the interview with healthy glasses. So let's jump into the first one. This is the
Narancsbor, orange wine. Igen, ez már egy ikonikus bora a borászatnak. Ezt minden évben készítettük.
Yes, this one is already kind of an iconic wine for the winery. We make it every year. It's made mostly from tramini, and we season it with a little cserszegi fűszeres, like the name suggests. We usually keep it on the skins for about a month. And during processing, what's really important is hand destemming, working with whole berries. And even during punch down and maceration, we try to be very gentle, so it doesn't become too tannic. In my experience with orange wines, people can struggle with harsh tannins. That's why I like to call this an entry-level orange wine. It brings those familiar white wine notes, but also the depth of an orange wine. And in terms of freshness, it can absolutely deliver that crisp white wine freshness too.
So, Narancsbor, orange wine, as Maci said, is not made with oranges. Let's make that very clear. As we can see from the first wine, you have a very natural approach, a low intervention approach. Can you explain a little bit what does it mean, like producing low intervention wine, kind of natural bio wines?
Hát ez a szőlőben indul, mint minden jó bor.
Well, it starts in the vineyard, like every good wine does. We farm without systemic, absorbed chemicals, and we try not to think in monoculture terms. We want to bring biodiversity back into the vineyards with different cover crops and other methods. We focus on strengthening the vine's immune system rather than just treating diseases. So first and foremost, we try to grow healthy vines that can resist problems on their own. That's key. And we believe that the life you build in the vineyard will show up later in the wine too. That living, vibrant environment we create out there becomes something you can taste in the bottle.
And for you, so yeah, you kind of answered, but so that's why you chose this approach rather than a more traditional one, right?
Igen, hát ez volt az elsődleges oka.
Yes, that was the main reason. But honestly, I've always been drawn to it. Back then, it wasn't even this clear-cut. When I started, natural winemaking wasn't really an established movement in Hungary yet. But the very first vineyard I planted, from day one I farmed it without systemic chemicals. It wasn't some big statement, I just felt it was the right way. And what I'm sure about is this. If you don't use systemic chemicals and you strengthen the vine's immune system, the grape skins get a bit thicker, a bit more waxy, and that's a tangible sign that you can make more substantial, more complex wines from organically farmed grapes. Because the skins carry so much aroma and so many important compounds. So yes, we really believe that grapes grown this way can produce more serious, more structured wines.
And we can feel it already that this wine is full of energy, it's full of character.
Magán a pincében, hogyha egy kicsit tovább megyünk a szőlőből,
And in the cellar, if we go one step further, everything is spontaneous. We don't use any commercial dried yeast, and we work a lot with lees. This wine isn't crystal clear, it's not filtered, not fined. Lees give extra depth, aromatics, texture. In the past, wine evaluation even included whether a wine was mirror clear or not, but we don't chase that. We let that go. And I actually have a really nice memory connected to lees. I was talking to an old man in the cellar row, and he told me, "Son, I still have a wine that's been on its mother for 2 years." I asked, "What do you mean, on its mother?" And it turned out he meant the wine was on its lees. No sulfur added, untouched, yet it was still holding up because the lees protected it. It stayed stable in his cellar for 2 years. And I just loved that expression, on its mother. It reminded me, we don't have to invent everything. Sometimes we just need to return to old knowledge. And yes, I tasted his wines. He's got some really great ones.
So at the beginning of the interview, we talked about Mátra. You were there because of your father, because of your family, you started there. But for you, what makes this region special?
Véleményem szerint a Mátra,
In my opinion, Mátra, maybe I'm biased here, but it's one of the most valuable wine regions in the country. There are very few places with such complex soils and such a unique microclimate. Mátra is quite large, but what I personally call the real Mátra is the foothills where we farm. There's also a bigger flat area that has a totally different climate and soil. If we're talking about the hills around Kékes, a long time ago there was the Pannonian Sea here, and when Kékes formed and rose up, it pushed up those marine sediments around it. That's how these hills were created. Then volcanic ash and lava covered them, and through erosion we ended up with this very mixed, very complex soil. You can find volcanic ash and tough soils, and beneath that, limestone marine sediments. The limestone helps preserve acidity, so it supports the structure of the acids in the wine. Minerality comes from the volcanic soils. And cool air coming down from the Mátra slows the early morning warming, so acids are preserved even more. That's why, even at full ripeness, you can still make wines with beautiful structure and freshness. And with climate change becoming more intense, this matters even more. Preserving acidity is crucial, and Mátra is really suited for that. So I think you can make very complex, very finely detailed wines here, not only light aromatic styles. Sure, this region works great for fresh, fragrant varieties, but it can also support heavier reds or even orange wines.
And you can feel it in your wines because, as you said, basically you made a wine out of two what are considered like light aromatic, but at the same time you made a very round with a good body wine, a good structure, and at the same time you kept the good acidity, the good freshness.
Yes.
So beautifully balanced. We talked about a little bit of the region and the qualities. Now let's talk a bit of harvesting, where your origins are in the origins. Let's talk a bit about harvesting, where your origins are from, and the 2025 harvest. What do you think about that? How was it?
hát sokkal jobb volt, mint a 24-es abból a szempontból. Nem kezdődött olyan korán, nem volt olyan meleg.
It was much better than 2024, mainly because it didn't start so early. It wasn't that hot, and we had a beautiful autumn, so the harvest mood was more pleasant. I was very satisfied. The grapes were healthy all year. We didn't have fungal diseases. Sure, drought showed up for us too, but the upside was no fungal pressure at all. It was so dry that fungi basically had no chance, which obviously made organic farming easier. Overall, it was a good year. We didn't have issues with acidity either. Acids didn't drop. We harvested with really nice acidity. What wasn't perfect was nutrient supply in the vines. You could feel that. Fermentations were a bit slower, but they completed, and we don't have major problems. So I'm happy with what came into the cellar, and I have high expectations for this vintage.
Because this has been an argument of talking in 2025. So you in Mátra, or personally you didn't have to face the aranysárga bogár?
Igen, tehát a fitoplazmáról kérdezel, akkor...
If you mean phytoplasma, unfortunately I think it's everywhere. They've detected it in a few places in Mátra. In our village and in our specific vineyard site, it hasn't been detected yet, but the symptoms can look very similar across different forms. I didn't want to take risks. Wherever I saw any symptomatic vine, I removed it. I cut out around 200 vines, mostly in the Kek Frankos blocks. I don't have illusions. I think it will appear sooner rather than later. So we're preparing for a serious fight, trying to act together, coordinated. That's really all we can do.
Anyway, as you said already, your grapes, your vines are very strong already by themselves without any help from outside. So let's hope that they will be strong against this one as well.
Ebben bizonyít.
We talked about the harvesting, we talked about your job in the vineyard, and now it's winter. So are you resting? Are you chilling now, or what's the job of the winemaker during winter?
Amikor ezt a szakmát választottam, akkor ez koncepció volt, és ez volt a legnagyobb...
When I chose this profession, one of the most attractive things was this. You can live in rhythm with nature. There's a flow to it. And yes, winter is calmer. From spring through late autumn, the vineyard gives you endless work. That's when you put in the energy. Winter is quieter, but that doesn't mean we do nothing. There's a lot of work in the cellar, bottling, for example. This is also when we can focus more on marketing, designing labels, writing wine descriptions. It's slower, more withdrawn work, down in the cellar, more intimate in a way. And that's one of the gifts of this job. You share a rhythm with nature.
So yeah, it's a harder job during summer, but there is no rest for winemakers.
Hát egyáltalán. Csak egy kicsit más ritmusú. Igen.
Pruning starts around now too, and that's actually one of my favorite vineyard jobs. It's like meditation. You stop at every vine and shape its path for next year. It's a real connection with the plant. It can be monotonous, but it clears your mind and puts your thoughts in order. So yeah, it's a really good kind of work.
You are the owner and of course the winemaker of your winery. And I think as a winemaker, there are, especially in your kind of system with low intervention, like leaving the wine just do it by itself, it might happen that mistakes happen, something that you don't expect might happen. So how do you handle these kind of things? And if you had really something that you said like, oh, what I'm gonna do now?
Alapvetően én azt gondolom, hogy ha valaki...
I believe that if someone wants to make natural wines, first they should learn conventional winemaking. That's where you start. And then, step by step, as you gain experience and really understand the processes, you can slowly leave behind the tools of conventional winemaking. But it has to be done gradually. If someone reaches the level where they truly make natural wines, that's the result of complex work and serious attention to detail. You can only make natural wine safely, or closer to safely, if every single step is in its place. From the vineyard all the way to bottling, you have to pay attention to everything. Hygiene is non-negotiable. Even so, of course, I've had wines that went wrong. I experimented a lot, and with experimentation, you'll have failures too. For example, I worked a lot with whole cluster fermentation. In 2020, I had one experiment that turned out brilliantly with Kek Frankos. Before that, I tried it with Cabernet Sauvignon too. It's a style I love. But the final wine can be very risky. Volatile acidity can hit hard. And after 2020, I think in 2021, I ruined a bigger batch so badly that it couldn't be saved. That hurts, of course. But you take the lesson and you move on. And sometimes you try to make palinka out of something. Well, that didn't really work either. So yes, these things happen.
Alapvetően szerintem a mátrai vörösborok.
But overall, I think Mátra red wines can live a very long time. My first vintage was 2018, and luckily I saved quite a few bottles. I open and taste them every year, and they're still holding together beautifully, still with a future ahead. I wouldn't even say they've reached their plateau yet. Of course, it depends on the vintage. 2018 was powerful, big-bodied, dense. But 2019 is also in a beautiful place. I think these wines can easily go 10 years.
Of course, your approach is, as a winemaker, is one of the closest one to nature, and this is also how you live your life. But we are surrounded by technology. Technology now is something that we use on a daily basis. And about technology, what I wanted to ask you is, do you think that at some point AI, with the help of AI, we could help suggesting wines to regular people?
Én inkább tehát tőlem egy picit távol áll maga az AI. Ezzel együtt...
Well, like you said, I'm definitely closer to nature. AI is a bit far from me personally. But at the same time, I do think it can help a lot on the consumer side. Because there's an enormous amount of information behind wines, stories, aromatic profiles, tasting notes, wine descriptions. If you can feed all of that into AI, and AI can tailor it to someone's personal taste and recommend wines based on that, then yes, I think that can be a really good path. A good way to use the positive side of artificial intelligence.
So even from the words of a natural winemaker, we have, let's say, the approval for our little project, our little AI. We are glad that Mátyás came here to our office today to taste his amazing wines, to learn a bit more about his winery. Thank you very much.
Köszönöm a meghívást.
And we will see you next time. Follow us. Soon you will be able to taste and to get Mátyás wine also from our website. And thank you very much, everybody.
Cheers.